Okay, good evening. I do believe that we are live. I'm going to verify that. And if someone wants to pop up in the comments and say hello, that would be very helpful. This is Laurel Libby coming to you live from my living room in Auburn. And I have some wonderful guests on tonight. So thank you so much for joining in. I can see that we are live. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, ladies, for hopping on here tonight with me. I will be introducing all three of my guests in just a few moments, but I want to take a couple seconds here and just introduce the topic of the evening. If you received my email earlier today, or if you saw my Facebook post last evening, you know we're going to be talking about privacy tonight. And we're going to be talking about some legislation that is before us in the Maine legislature. And so if you think that is a topic that your friends and family might be interested in, please go ahead and like and share this video so that everyone can hear what we're talking about tonight. You may remember a little bit earlier this year that there was an incident with a high school in Maine that was considering using students' fingerprints to track. Oh, sorry guys, I'm hearing that I have technical difficulties. Can you guys see me? If you can see me, can you let me know in the comments, because I'm hearing that my camera is black from someone watching. I'm seeing it here. So just if you can let me know, that would be super helpful. Hang on one second while we check on technical difficulties. We can see you now. Okay, great. All right, well, we're going to keep powering through then. As I was saying, if you have friends and family that would be interested in this topic, if they were fired up when they heard that this high school was going to be collecting students' fingerprints and using those to track attendance, and we're excited to hear that they were no longer going to be doing that and are interested in this topic, then make sure that you share this live. The other thing is we'd love to know where you're tuning in from. We four are in various parts of the state tonight, and we would love to know where you are watching us from. So tonight we're going to be talking, as I said, about privacy. Who has the right, who has the ability to use your private information? And that's some very private information. We'll be talking about exactly what in just a few moments. And I'll say we come from a variety of backgrounds, the four of us, and we coalesce around this issue of privacy. So very excited to have these three ladies on here tonight. I'll start by introducing Senator Lisa Keim. Senator Lisa Keim is a Republican from Dixfield, and she is the Senate Minority Assistant Leader. Welcome. And thank you so much for being on here tonight with us, Lisa. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Laurel.
Next up, we have Representative Maggie O'Neill. Maggie is a Democrat from Saco. She serves on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and we are thrilled to have you on here tonight. Thanks so much, Maggie.
Thanks so much for having me.
And last but very certainly not least, we have Megan Sway from the ACLU of Maine. Megan and I have worked together on a variety of issues, but very often privacy. So delighted to have you on here tonight, Megan. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
So we're going to dive right in, but I want to remind folks to please go ahead and share your questions in the comments. This can be a really dense topic and complicated, and the bills that we're going to be talking about are pretty massive, and we want to make sure that we're talking about it in a way that folks can understand. There's a lot of meat to it, so we'll be trying to talk about it in a way that's really understandable, but if there's something that comes up that you have a question about, we would love to make sure we can address your questions and make sure that everybody knows what is going on here in the state of Maine. So, Megan, I want to start with you. And if you could just explain to us, what are biometrics? What are we talking about when we talk about biometric data? And what is it not?
Sure. So biometric data, you can sort of tell from the term bio that it's our biology. So it's our fingerprints, our eye scans, our voice prints, even our DNA, things that are innate to our biology. And it's measurements that companies and individuals can take to determine each of us as individuals. So our fingerprints, if you fingerprint in Caribou, they would have been able to tell who a kid was from their fingerprint, from your retina scan. So these are different biological characteristics that companies and individuals are measuring. It is not things like your email password or when I go on Nordstroms.com and then I go to the Gap and then somebody follows me from one site to the other. That's not biometric, but that is still my personal data. But I think of biometrics as like the most personal, most sensitive. Unlike a credit card or a social security number, if a hacker gets that, it's annoying and it's hard, but you can change those numbers. You can't change your fingerprints. You can't change your retina scans. And so biometrics are really the most sensitive. And then there's other sensitive information you can reveal, but biometrics are really like the top most sensitive things that you can't change and you can't get back once they're out there in the world.
So I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but one of those things people probably wonder is, does it, when I pull up my iPhone and I use my face to log in, that's using biometrics, correct? That's kind of a common example of biometrics. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense, Megan. So I guess it's probably pretty obvious to folks why that why we would want to protect our biometric data, but how could it, or is it being used, that data, that personal information?
Yeah, it's being used in all sorts of ways. I mean, I think there are a lot of examples so there's a company called Clearview AI, and they go around the internet and scrape people's faces, the pictures of your face from public images, from your Facebook post, from other things. And then they have a database of millions of faces, and they allow people to pay to search through those faces. And there have been cases where, abusive spouses have gone and tried to find their former partner through searching through, using the measurements of someone's face to try to go through this database of millions of images. Other examples, I want to say it was Six Flags at some point, was asking for people's fingerprints when they got admission to a Six Flags. It's not really clear why they were doing it, but that's another example of using it. Maggie, I don't know if you have examples that you can think of other than that. Those are the two that I always remember because it never made sense to me to need your fingerprint for Six Flags.
Sure. There are two basic uses that you'll see it appear in. One is for authentication, using your face or your fingerprint or something like that, like a password. And in that case, we're thinking about how do we keep that data secure. And the second big use is about surveillance. And a lot of people are concerned about living in a society where we shift from having, normal video cameras that you can review after an event occurs and identify someone, to having, for example, a face recognition camera run constantly on a public sidewalk of a bank. And a lot of folks feel uncomfortable with the idea of having companies running a face recognition camera at all times, or a government entity running a face recognition camera on a public street, for example.
So, and one example that you gave, Megan, I thought was really interesting, because at one point, a photo itself of itself is not biometrics, but what you bring up is really interesting. Scraping the images and then using the biometric data that you can get from the photos to identify people. So that's really interesting, because just someone's image alone, I wouldn't really think of that use of kind of scraping the data and the millions of images out there. So the next question I have, Maggie, is for you, and it kind of goes to, where are we right now? Okay, so where does our current law stand, and what protections are currently in place or not in place? And if you can give any kind of comparison to other states, and Lisa, you may have some answers to this as well. If you can give some comparison to other states, that would be helpful as well.
Sure. So I'll start by talking about at the federal level. And the answer is really not enough. We don't have enough protections. There are certain specific protections that we'd be familiar with, Like if you are interacting with your doctor's office, your health data is protected by HIPAA, for example. But a lot of what we do in life, and a lot of our life is online now, a lot of what we do in life doesn't have protections. And the good news is that states have the opportunity to act and do what Congress has failed to do and make protections. So Maine has been a leader in a couple of areas so far, and we're working on doing even more. But the things that we've done in the past couple of years are that we have banned government from using face recognition. So that would mean, putting a face recognition camera to monitor a public street and have a city or our state government run that. That's one great thing that Maine has led the country on. And we also have really clear warrant requirements in statute for how government can access the location of your cell phone and your private communication. So if you're texting on your cell phone or sending an email, there's a really clear requirement for when government can access that. And the third thing that Maine has done so far that's a really big deal is requiring internet providers like Spectrum or whoever your internet provider is to get your permission before they want to share your data, because they have access to pretty much anything you do online, because you can't help going through your internet provider for that.
Yeah, and is that specifically, Maggie, sharing that with the government as far as the internet provider, that piece, that third piece that you mentioned?
That piece more has to do with there are certain requirements in federal law that have to do with when things can be shared with government. The main law that we have right now has to do with sharing it with third parties. Like, so an example is Spectrum would have to get your permission to sell your data about what you do online to third parties. They'd have to ask you first and get your permission first.
Okay.
So that's what we have right now.
Yeah.
And we're working on doing even more.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because that actually leads right into our next question for Lisa. And that is, we'll be talking about some of the differences between your bills coming up. And one of the things that, as we contemplate changes to Maine's law, that I think about, and I think you think about as well, Lisa, is, the considerations when we're making laws that affect private business versus that affect government, and balancing individual rights in there as well. And that is a really complex balance that I know you guys have been talking about a lot in committee. The Judiciary Committee is where these bills are being considered. And so can you speak to some of those considerations there and the differences that you see in addressing those concerns?
Sure. Like Maggie mentioned, government surveillance is one of the things that we already address, just recognizing that that's a really big level of scary, right? To think, and we can really look at China to see what happened there, right? They, during COVID, especially, and to enforce their lockdowns, they have cameras on their public spaces, and they were using facial recognition. And, I read a story of a pilot who came back from a flight and didn't fulfill his full, whatever it was, of weeks of quarantine before he went out to dinner. And he, was heavily sanctioned, lost his job, lots of, impacts from the government, because they knew he went out to dinner because they have facial recognition software. And that ability to kind of over police and watch the population at large, right? Because then you think if they've got this data on everyone, there's no end to what they can do, capturing our text messages, really anything, right? If we don't tightly control what the government can use and have access to for our information without our permission or without a search warrant and those kinds of things. And then the concerns around business is really, I think, first of all, recognizing that this is a matter of our personal rights to say, just because we do business with you does not give you the automatic ability to take our information and use it however you want. And right now in Maine, there, other than what we have for internet providers, Maine people have no protections of their data. So whatever we do now is first for Maine people. It doesn't mean that there are not privacy policies out there already protecting us, because companies already have them in place as a matter of good practice, and also as a matter of compliance with other states. So other state laws are actually helping Maine people right now. But when you think about it, there's still so much that we need to take on as a state to protect Maine people, and really basic things. If you think about it, like when you go to the grocery store and you do self-checkout, you'll see your face is being scanned while you're doing your self-checkout. Now, I don't think the grocery store intentionally is probably lifting your biometric data from that scan, but whoever that they are contracting with may be doing that. And there is no law to stop it. There's no reason that they cannot do that. But you, as the grocery store shopper, do not agree or consent that your face be scanned just because you're buying a gallon of milk. And so these are the things that we need to make sure that this is your right to keep this information. And just as Megan said, it would be, I've had all of my information stolen, my social security number and everything. But the things I can't replace are my biometrics. And businesses and people, they're making it so easy for us to really not have to participate in our own lives, right? Like we don't have to remember our passcodes anymore because we just use our phone and it recognizes our face. But we are giving so much away that if we lose this, we lose control of our entire lives, right? Because everything about us then can be replicated. And I was reading a university professor who has whose focus is data and AI, has said that within 5 years, it is expected that AI will know more about you than you do yourself and can better answer questions about you. So if you have AI that can answer questions such as what was your first pet's name and the color of your first car and all of those things, and they also have your retina scan and all of your biometrics, how then do you ever get back your identity? And right now, I think we accept that it has eased our lives without realizing the ramifications of it. And so that's where we need to come in. I mean, we're really way behind the scenes at this point, way behind the times at this point, even coming in where we're at. But we absolutely have to come in and start laying down this framework for Maine people.
Well, and one thing I would say in response to that, Lisa, that hits me is that we do somewhat quite casually. Like I said, I log into my phone using my face, and I kind of, that was a new technology, that was an update in this iPhone, and just kind of as a matter of course, right, without even thinking, we kind of accept these next steps along this path of using your biometrics without even really giving it too much of a second thought. And so I would, at the same time that we're having this conversation, encourage people to start thinking a little bit critically about what we are putting out there and the responsibility that is on us as well to protect our own data and our own information. It can be challenging to do that at the same time. And that's what, Megan, I want to talk about for a couple minutes with you is as I read through these bills, I kept reading this term, dark pattern, referenced. And I know all three of you probably know exactly what I'm talking about there with dark pattern, but can you explain what dark pattern is and give an example of what that is that folks might understand? So if they go reading through this bill and see dark pattern, they know what that is.
Sure. So dark patterns refers to when you're on the web and the web developer is trying to shape your choices based on the pattern on the screen. So an example of this is, I keep talking about shopping examples, but if when I'm on Sephora and I go on Sephora and it's like, do you want to save 15%, sign up for our email? And I work at the ACLU, I don't want any more emails, whatever my privacy reasons are, I don't want it. But the way to say no is this tiny little gray X that you can barely see. But there are certain, but yes, I want to, or I don't like saving money. It's like, the way that the screen is designed to get you to opt in to sharing your data without thinking about it. And it makes it hard for you to say, no, I don't want to share my data. I don't want to opt into this. I don't want to opt out is what it would be. I don't want to opt out of sharing my information. And I can't, and my eyesight's going bad. I can't find the little gray X on the screen to say no.
Okay. So it's kind of, it's kind of to check the box, like, yes, we gave the ability to opt out, but it's really hard for people to actually see and utilize it. It's not straightforward and transparent. It's
trying to manipulate the way you think or operate. So it's literally trying to manipulate your actions through design to manipulate you into giving over more of your data.
Okay. So it's not a straightforward, like, do you consent to, or do you opt in, or do you opt out? It's a very convoluted system is the dark pattern. Okay. Well, Maggie and Lisa, both of your bills are quite long and very technical. And so I want you guys to both have an opportunity to give us kind of the elevator pitch for what your bills would do. I know they both come from a little bit of a different direction. And so, Maggie, why don't we start with you? I know both of these bills are coming through the Judiciary Committee. They have both had many, I think, simultaneous public hearing and then work sessions. What number work session are we on? I know the one for tomorrow has gotten postponed. We'll talk about that at the end, but what number work session are we at, and what does your bill do, Maggie?
I wish I could say what number. Lisa, what do you think? 15? We've had a lot of meetings about this.
I was going to guess 8, but
and I just want to start by saying that I've been working on this issue for, I think, 3 or 4 years now, and that I've worked with both Laurel and Lisa on these issues all along. I really think that privacy is one of those issues that most Mainers value, and it's really neat to be able to work together on this with both of you. So high level, the goal of our bill, of both of our bills, is to fill the gaps that are left because we really don't have protections in place. There are just no rules of the road right now. So we are coming in and trying to make protections where we can make them in Maine while we're waiting for Congress to get their act together, essentially. So we want to protect your sensitive information and to give you choices about how and whether your information gets used. So to go back to the face recognition example, the way that my bill, and I think Lisa's would operate too, is to say, don't use face recognition on us or collect our biometric data without telling us that you're going to do it and getting our permission first.
Okay.
Or looking at something like health data that isn't covered by HIPAA, things like your Apple Watch that you might wear, or when you Google if you don't feel well and you're trying to see if, trying to get an answer, give that the same kind of protection that you would in your doctor's office. Don't share it with people and sell it and use that in ways that you wouldn't expect. So that's the very high level.
We have a comment that I'm going to kind of turn into a question. I'm going to pop it up on the screen, and this is from Paul, who says, no opt-out, opt-in. It is not complicated. Do we really have to explain consent? So can you explain? I know we've been on a long course with opt-out, opt-in on these bills, and yeah, opt-in is kind of maybe where we want to be, but I'm not sure we're there. So can you explain where we're at with opt-in, opt-out, et cetera?
I'd love to talk about that. Yeah, the basic question is, do we make you as a person on the internet go out of your way to say no a million times on every website that you're on? So every new website that you open up, you have to say no to a bunch of different uses of ways that your data could be used or shared. And that puts a lot of work on you as a consumer. And that's one thing that I wanted to address with my bill. to align it with consumer expectations and make it so that we don't have to be exhausted and click no every single time. And then what you end up doing is even someone that's very concerned with privacy like me might, be in a hurry or just not have the energy to click no 20 times. And I end up just consenting by their standards, consenting to sharing your data. So the way that my bill would address that is to basically say, don't collect extra data if you don't need it and it doesn't match up to what you're doing. And once you do collect it, don't use our data in ways that we wouldn't expect. And I can give examples of that.
Yeah, if you could give an example of that, that would be helpful. And then we'll have Lisa explain about her bill as well.
Absolutely. So an example is if you opened up your Maps app to drive to the doctor's office, that app would be collecting your location data to help get you to the doctor's office.
Mm-hmm.
And what this bill would do is it would say, don't collect extra information about me. For example, that I'm going to get a certain kind of medical treatment and then sell that about me. Or if I put in that I'm going to a certain location and Google Maps can tell that I'm meeting up with a religious group or I'm meeting up with a political group, don't use that information about me to try to target how I might vote in the next election, for example.
Okay. So you're on Maps, you expect it to get you to a certain place, but you don't expect it to be using your data in other ways and sharing that information with other people. So your bill would say, stick to getting me to my destination and that's it.
Exactly. And don't tire me out by making me say no every time I open up an app or a website, which I think a lot of us will see now because of laws in other states. Some websites, when you open it up, it'll give you 12 choices and you say, no, I don't want to use it for targeted advertising. No, I don't want to consent for, analytics. No, I don't. So it makes you go through all this work each time you open up a website. And we're trying to just make it an easier experience and align it with what you'd expect.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's a really helpful explanation, I think, Maggie. Lisa, how about your bill?
So interestingly, I originally put in I put in a bill last session, so I guess that's 3 years ago now or more, and then again this session. But mine, it came from me actually being on a Home Depot website and seeing the banner at the bottom that says "Do not sell my data" or "Do not sell my information" or whatever. And it's this pretty substantial banner. And then I click on it, and then it says, "Are you a California resident?" And I was like, why is this only for California residents? So that was what got me started. I've always been concerned about privacy. Yeah, all Maine people are, right? And wanting that. So that's one of the things that's in the bill that I proposed, is to have a banner. So something's very obvious that people can just, say, don't sell my data. There's, what Maggie was mentioning, you have to consider what they call consent fatigue, it took me a while to recognize the fact that if you're asked too many times about, is it okay to use this? Is it okay to use this? Eventually, you just want to do whatever it is you're trying to accomplish online and you're just going to say yes. So that was a ratcheting back for me on my considerations of how to go forward with protecting privacy. And I eventually settled on, rather than a California model or something else, I settled on a model that's what is being called the Connecticut framework. And it's been passed through many states at this point. I don't know how many, maybe as many as 20. Maybe it's something like that. And the reason why that framework is why I think Maine should go in that same direction is because all businesses, many businesses, are operating across state lines, and they need to be able to comply, right? The first thing I want is that businesses for them to comply and do business with us because we want them to, but also protect our data. And the best way for them to do that is to have a framework that they understand. Think about all the behind the scenes, the software, the framework of building out a website, of how you recognize data and what you do with it. The more similar that can be from state to state, the easier it is for the businesses to comply, and also the less expensive for them to implement, which is an important consideration. So the policy that I put forward is based on Connecticut. That is less of something that consumers in general understand, or maybe understand that they should care about, but for sure all businesses care about, and we do as well, when we realize that we want businesses to be able to be successful here in Maine and give us the services and the goods that we are hoping to buy. So at this point, I think, Maggie's bill, was 1977. Her original bill was very, very different than where it's now at, which is framed on the pattern and the framework of 1973. So there's less differences now in our bills than there was originally.
Okay, and we're getting a question on LD number. So Lisa, yours is 1973, LD 1973, and Maggie, yours is 1977, LD 1977. Okay, thank you. So we are talking a lot about businesses and how this would affect businesses and consumer relationship with businesses. Megan, I just want to put a bug in your ear. We're getting a lot of questions about government, and I would love to, when we do wrap up, we're not there yet, but when we do wrap up, I'd like to talk a little further about where else we can go with making sure that government is constrained. And I think all of us would like to see next steps on that as well, in addition to that the government is banned from using facial recognition and that they can't access our communications without a warrant. But so just stay tuned, guys, if you want to hear more about that, because that will be coming up towards the end of the conversation when we talk about next steps and where we go from here. So what would you say, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, Megan. What would you say is maybe the biggest difference between the two bills and, the direction that you've seen them as an outside but interested party watching the process? I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, I think they each have, as Senator Kime said, they've become more structured more similarly. I think the difference that I see is that that 1973 is built on Connecticut's model still allows companies to do sort of what they're already doing as long as they tell you in their privacy policy. Mm-hmm. And on the one hand, it's crucially important that companies are upfront with us about what they're doing with our data. So I agree that they should be telling us in their privacy policy what they're doing. But if anyone, I don't know if any of you have done this, I have tried to read privacy policies and I'm a lawyer and my eyes glaze over, they cross. It's hard to get through that. And so I'm not sure how protective it is. And I'm not sure how much notice people will have because I don't know how many people are reading privacy policies. I think 1977, on the other hand, sort of at the outset says, what would a consumer expect to have their data used for? And so you can't collect or use data aside from expectations. And those are different approaches. And I think, I could see why businesses would not like the approach of don't collect data that isn't what a consumer would expect. And it is slightly different than Connecticut and a few other models. And on the other hand, I can see why consumers would want to tell companies, I only want to give you what I think I'm giving you and not more than what I think I'm giving you.
Yeah. So a question that just occurred to me, and I apologize for throwing this at you, Maggie, but as we talk about the bills and what they would do, would you anticipate, from what you've seen in other states, would you anticipate if the model like your bill passes, that there would be litigation regarding what is expected, like what is an expected use? Have any other states seen that as privacy policies have come through? Like we talked about the use of maps, right? If you're going to your OBGYN, you don't want that, compiled and being reported out. That's not an expected use of using maps, right? So would you anticipate seeing litigation regarding, what a consumer thinks is an expected use versus what the app or the business or the whatever considers an expected use?
So when we say align with what a consumer expects, that's like my shorthand version of explaining it. But the language in the bill has the way that it defines it is it says if you are interacting with a company for a purpose, for example, sharing your location data in order to get directions to a location, that's the purpose that you have shared your location with that company for. And if they want to use it for a second purpose and share it with a third party, then that would be beyond your what we're saying are your expectations. So I think that those purposes are going to be a lot clearer, less mushy than it sounds in this conversation, just because it's clear that if you share your location for the purpose of getting directions, that you wouldn't expect it to be sold to a third party to market you drugs because you drove to a cancer center, for example.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these are going to be clear-cut cases about what a consumer would expect.
Okay. Lisa, a question for you. You know, we're talking about these two bills. There's still a long way to go, I would say, for both of them. There's still at least one more work session, then there's the House and the Senate. So can you walk us through that process a little bit, what we can expect for next steps with these two bills?
Yes, so the Judiciary Committee has been collecting comments. Hopefully, the Ds and Rachel Henderson, Representative Henderson, and I are working on a draft. But we have ours mostly done. The comments that have come in will maybe adjust, slightly our version of the bill. And the Democrats have not yet finished their version of 1973, but they are going to hopefully put that out. Then there'll be further comments, I would assume, on both bills. And then a work session where next week where we would vote. I would assume the Judiciary Committee would vote the bill out at that point, hopefully, because we need to wrap it up and be to the end. One of the other things I wanted to mention that could very likely be a large difference between the two is I've heard a lot of talk about exemptions for nonprofits, exemptions for education institutions, broad entity-wide exemptions for entities that are fall under HIPAA or GLBA, which are financial institutions. This is a really big concern for me because if we're not protecting Maine people, if you look at the list of nonprofits, it's all hospitals. It's a huge list of nonprofits. ACLU, of course, them as well, which they're not in favor of exempting themselves. We've already discussed. But this is a really big concern for me because, as we talked, people need to realize that all the information about us is already out there. Your voice print can be captured in the same amount of time that you put your voicemail on your phone, right? Like, hello, that you've reached Lisa, right? That's what mine says. That's enough time for them to take a full voice print for me. So everything about me is already taken and known. What this needs to be for is our children, right? They're the ones that we're protecting because they are the only ones that still don't have a full database on them. And so if we start exempting all nonprofits, all educational institutions, our children are for sale. We know this. And we are just leaving the door wide open for their information to be taken and sold to the highest bidder for who knows how long, until someone decides to close the door on that when they finally realize it. So it's one of the things I'm going to be fighting for a lot, if that is how that I'm going to be fighting against that a lot if that's how the other version comes out, because I think we absolutely have to capture everybody, because privacy matters to everyone, and so everyone has to take the steps necessary to protect people's privacy. We can't be exempting huge swaths of the community around us, because then it's the biggest loophole of all.
Well, and that's an interesting topic, and I'm sure folks will be watching for that as well, because there is a lot of concern. And yeah, I'm seeing a comment here that was right along the lines of what I was just going to say is government doesn't like to regulate itself, and yet that's where my interest lies most, in making sure that government is regulated. And you talk about educational institutions. Well, educational institutions, if you can name some educational institutions in Maine that aren't taxpayer funded, right? Funded by Maine people, I think it would be a pretty short list. And so I can't speak to that in an educated way. I haven't read that piece of an amendment, but I certainly would be interested to follow that as they come forward, because I want us to be leading the way in making sure that first and foremost that the government cannot be collecting and using this data. So let's loop back around to that. Next steps as far as ensuring that we are legislating for ourselves, for government first and foremost. What would you say, Megan, are kind of next steps and bills that you would want to see in that arena to protect Maine people from our government?
I think there are two things. One, I mean, Representative O'Neill had a bill this past session that sort of got whittled away a little bit, but had stronger warrant protections for electronic data, and making sure that that we really uphold the warrant requirement, so that the government can't, without probable cause and a neutral arbitrator, decide whose data they're accessing. So I think that's one area. One thing that I also wanted to mention, and I have heard it's not as much of an issue in Maine, but we also know that Maine technologically sometimes lags behind other states, is that a lot of other states, police and governments are going to private businesses and buying data from private businesses. So getting around warrant requirements by going to businesses. They are doing things like, or in other states, putting in search term warrants. So they'll say, I want a warrant where Google has to reveal to me anyone who did a search term for this search term in this geographic area at this time, and then all these names come up. And so that's another way that we could protect, is to say you can't just ask for anyone who's used this search term without probable cause that a crime has been committed. So sorry that I'm a little all over the place, but I think sort of reining in warrants and reining in the ability to sort of do these mass warrants where you're not asking for a particular person's information based on probable cause, but you're sort of trying to throw a big net and see what comes up. That would be one way that we could protect our personal information.
So that's interesting, as you're bringing forward the not allowing police and governments to buy data from private businesses. And here we are talking, that's kind of like a backdoor, right, of what we're talking about here with what how we're saying this would regulate businesses and not let them sell or use this data for purposes that it's not intended, which prevents them from selling it to government/police without a warrant. Would that be accurate, that would be one kind of use of these current bills?
Correct. And I want to be clear that I want to say it was a work session, but the state police said they are not currently doing this. So I don't want to spread false rumors that Maine police are doing this, but it is something that police in other states are doing. And we could expect, there's nothing preventing it from happening here in Maine. It's just not currently happening.
Sure. So it's not a protection. They say they're not doing it, and we'll take that. But it could be, our data could be used in that way and is in other states. So it's a good food for thought as we look at these bills moving forward. Maggie and Lisa, I'd like to just give you both an opportunity to say any last words about these bills, and then we'll wrap up for tonight. And I'll scan questions while you guys give your last comments to make sure we didn't miss anything important.
I wanted to jump in just on the idea of government, and what is more scary even to me than the government having no controls over what they use for our data is the collusion between, big tech and government, right? Because there's a natural push and pull sort of happening between the relationship. I think that then goes away and then becomes like exponentially worse if there's collusion, right? So if big tech and government are colluding on data, and then that control of people could just be boundless. So that's where I think, we do have to absolutely watch and make sure that we're keeping the two separate and, keeping tight controls on government, also keeping tight controls on business, and then some sort of control on the collusion as well. Future bill, no, that's not this bill.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Maggie, how about you?
Sure. So I think what I would add to that, because I was working on both of these issues at once, is I see the controls, because I'm reading a lot of comments and I've liked seeing what people have had to say. And I'm seeing some people say, we should really focus on government. Why are we focusing on what businesses do? And this conversation really highlights, for those of us who are interested in making sure there are guardrails around what government does with data, a place where our data is constantly collected is by private entities. And we have seen erosions of our traditional Fourth Amendment protections. And when those protections erode, and there are lower standards for accessing all the data that's out there, it becomes a concern what is held by private businesses. So if you have more control and are able to say no, or able to have guardrails around what businesses collect about you, you have better control about what government has access to, if that's something that you're interested in. So I think that's a great thing to think about, this side of the picture and how that's relevant. And I would just say to people that that Maine definitely has an opportunity to improve the guardrails around what government can do. We worked on making some improvements this year, but we have a lot more that we could be making. And ACLU is a great organization to follow and see updates. But a really good opportunity that we didn't get to take advantage of is things beyond your communications that I think government would think of as business records, but it's really everything you do online can be accessed at a lower bar than a warrant. So that's something that I want to continue working on. And I won't be in the legislature and won't be able to keep working on that issue. I've definitely tried, and I hope that those of you who are listening will keep an eye out for those bills and share that it's important to you.
Well, thank you so much. And we got another question in the comments asking if the outcome is kind of an either or on these bills. I suspect we know the answer. Do either of you have, Lisa or Maggie, have input on that? Or could they
I'm
both?
an optimist. I keep hoping that that we can find somewhere to meet in the middle, because Lisa and I have kept having conversations, and I have modeled my bill to match her structure, and she's heard some things that I have said and other people have said and made changes. So we're in dialogue, and my personal goal is to get somewhere where we have one product that we're both proud of, and we probably won't be happy with every aspect of it, but that we can have something that we have both really worked hard on together and we're proud of. So
yeah, interestingly enough, we're both termed out, so it has been a topic that I've put a lot of time and energy into because it's so important. And I'll be very pleased to see Maine have privacy protections for our people, and we'll get there, I'm certain.
We will.
Well, thank you all for being on here tonight. I really appreciate it. And don't worry, folks, I will post the LDs in the comments, but there are not final amendments yet. And I don't think that the amendments are even online, because there would be multiple different iterations, right? At this point, right now, this is one of the bills, and there's sections where it says, not complete yet. We're still working on this, under construction. And so if you are interested, stay tuned, but I will at least put the Maine LD number link in the comments. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Lisa and Maggie. I really appreciate you guys hopping on here tonight and letting Maine people know what's going on in the world of privacy. We do have a long way to go, but I'm hopeful that we're going to get something working together for our Maine people. So thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thank you
so much for having us.
Have a good evening.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night.